Let me start this video by saying that this was a hard video to write. After all, when it comes to the Mimic, it's literally impossible for me to overstate this game's influence and popularity on Roblox, and the Roblox horror genre specifically. I mean, before the Mimic, there wasn't really a large audience for horror games on Roblox. Most horror experiences boiled down to either a zombie game, PvP game with monsters, or one-off unique experiences like Sanatorium, which are mostly based off of horror games that already existed. But the Mimic was truly unique in the sense that it revolutionized the genre of horror on Roblox, and I would even argue that this game created the horror genre on Roblox. I'd wager that without this game, none of the games I've covered so far in the series would have gotten made. I truly believe it's that important. But when playing this game again for footage, the main question I sought to answer is this: does this game still hold up? Like, yeah, it was insane for its time, but how does it stack up now? But before we begin, I need to get two things out of the way first. First and foremost, yes, I am sick. It hopefully won't show up much, but if I sound congested, that's why. Secondly, I'm mostly going to be looking at Book 1 for this review, not Book 2 or the side game modes. I will be acknowledging their existence in the review, but when gathering footage, I sadly only had time to record all of Book 1. However, I think I want to save Book 2 for another day anyways, since it isn't finished and I wouldn't be able to properly review it, since only Chapter 1 is out right now. With that out of the way, join me in today's episode: How the Mimic Changed Roblox Forever. Twitch, Wednesday, videos, Sunday. Let's go. When I went back to play Book 1, I was very surprised to learn that the creator of this game had actually updated the majority of it to have different environments, monsters, and updated visuals. I was a little torn about reviewing the game in this way instead of how it originally was, but I decided it was fine for two reasons. One, I set the precedent for this in my episode on Bewildered, where I looked at Chapter 1 remastered, not Chapter 1 as it originally was. Secondly, as I stated in my intro, my main question going into this game was how well it still stacked up. And if updating a game is what it takes for it to still stack up with today's standards, well, I think that goes a long way towards answering that question, doesn't it? With that out of the way, my criteria are aesthetic, story, gameplay, and overall. Without further delay, let's begin with the first category. Oh, and obviously spoiler warning for all of Book 1 Control. Aesthetic. This game's aesthetic, in one word, is committed. I've actually seen a lot of interesting discourse on if this game's aesthetic is stereotypical or racist or bad in some politically incorrect way. I personally have no right to speak on those issues since it's not my culture being represented in this game, and I highly encourage you to do your own research and form your own opinions, but for the sake of the review, I found this game's aesthetic very pleasing to play through and very creepy in all the right ways. It's often said that Japanese horror games, or horror games from other cultures as a whole, are scarier to American audiences because of the sense of unfamiliarity that comes inherent with playing a game set in another culture. That principle is on full display here. It's very effective at scaring the player. Hearing the monsters playing a foreign instrument as it passes in front of you, or seeing a supernatural sakura tree in the middle of a seemingly normal high school, make for very cool set-piece moments, and this game succeeds massively in those set-piece moments. There are so many cool aesthetic choices, like the butterflies being the guardian spirits, the final boss's aesthetic of a spider, or the one time that we see a massive samurai monster crossing in front of us and vanishing into a river. Cool shit. One complaint that I had back in the original version of the game, though, was how the chase mazes in this game felt uninspired and a bit bland. However, with the new polish that has been added, the environments like the library and the first ever chase maze in Roblox history feel a lot more fleshed out as locations and complement the monsters very well. Speaking of the monsters, the polish update also helped them out tremendously. Back in the original, every monster in the game was basically variation on Cloaked Woman, but now we have insane monster designs like the long-necked librarian and the massive, almost fetus-like creature lurking in the bowels of the hospital. It's amazing how much care they took into making these early chapters feel up to par with the rest of the game, and it goes a long way in showing how much the developers care about this game and its players. I haven't mentioned this game's dedicated old-school Japanese aesthetic, partly because I'm not at liberty to speak of its authenticity, but I personally enjoyed playing through it and loved how committed this game was to it. It was very immersive, and regardless on if it was real-world accurate, it did an amazing job transporting me into the world of the game with the stunning visuals and sound cues. Story. This game is an interesting case where the story, and again we will be talking strictly about Book 1 here, starts off peculiarly but gets very strong about halfway through the chapters. I have a theory that this was because the devs maybe didn't quite know what they wanted their story to be about until around chapter 3, but that's mere speculation. We are high school students going to our high school to look for our group of missing friends, and that's where the story starts. But we actually don't learn that fact until about a third into chapter 2. In fact, when analyzing this game critically, I asked the people I was playing with in-game who they thought they were playing as, and I got wildly different answers, with Hellaman even saying he thought we were detectives investigating an abandoned school. Moving on with the story beats though, we are then trapped in the Mimic's mystical world, where they proceed to torment us and try to get us killed. And after that, basically nothing important happens until chapter 4, where we learn our mom and dad were kidnapped and we're being targeted by the Mimic because of our ancestry. There's actually a lot of cool environmental writings on the walls about the origins of Sama and Heihachi, the two key characters in the origins of the Mimic, but I found it quite hard to read when trying to avoid monsters at the same time. Halfway into chapter 4, we burn some cursed items and free the soul of our great-grandfather, who gives us his sacred blade and tells us to kill Sama, the Mimic, and free our parents as well as free our ancestors from the curse that binds them as servants, revealing that the monsters we have been trying to avoid this whole time have been our ancestors. Actually, very cool twist, not gonna lie. We then proceed to defeat Sama and her new second form, which is an exclusive feature of the Polish update, I believe, and we are presented with a choice to save our parents or kill Sama. Saving our parents is a trick set up by Sama and leads to a bad ending, while killing Sama is the good ending and reveals that Sama is only a servant of a higher power, but that our character and their family is safe, for now. Now, I like the story a lot, actually. It's really good. My one issue is that there's a massive span of time between chapter 1 and 4 where we basically get no story at all. It's not major, but it can make all of the plot dumping in chapter 4 feel heavy-handed and overwhelming after 2 chapters of having basically nothing. Gameplay. This game is literally just chase mazes and one boss fight at the end. But guess what? For the one time in this series' history, having just chase mazes is fine. Wanna know why? Because this game invented them. Maybe not invented, but definitely was the first to use them like this and popularize them for the genre. And as far as chase mazes go, the Mimic definitely has some good ones. Like, yeah, if the monsters see you, there's usually not a lot you can do except sometimes hide or get lucky and run out of their target zone if you have enough stamina. But this game makes up for that by having the monsters randomly run around the mazes, not targeted onto the player. And by having some massive mazes, where in rare cases, sometimes you won't even see the monsters, although my teammates certainly did. If this were a game that came out today, I'd be complaining about the lack of originality in the gameplay, but this is the origin of this type of gameplay. So while, yes, I've played millions of chase mazes, this game is where they all came from, and that deserves respect. Also, the boss fight is quite enjoyable since it's very low risk. On normal mode, you have infinite lives, so it's kind of just a fun hack and slash at the end to contrast all the running and fear. Overall, this game is the most important and revolutionary horror game in all of Roblox. And the thing I wanted to bring my attention to in this segment was the sheer volume of content in this game. Book 1 alone took me 2.5 hours to complete. And that was coming from someone who kind of knew what he was doing already before just hopping into it. There is a whole other book being made, 2 more promised in the future, and currently 4 side game modes that have an entire chapter's worth of content in and of itself. If I had to pick one Roblox horror game to spend the rest of my life playing, it'd be The Mimic, because it has the most content and the most depth within its content out of any Roblox horror game in existence, especially when you take in the nightmare mode for every single chapter in this game. I rank games on a scale of 1 to 10, with a 1 being stay away, 5 being neutral, and 10 being perfect. The Mimic does basically nothing wrong. The atmosphere is top-notch, and it is literally the most original horror game on Roblox. With all of this in mind, I rank The Mimic, the first ever 10 out of 10 perfect score. I've been Rister'sRobloxReviews, and thank you for watching.